The first thing I see is that the people who build and create great enterprises have a sense of curiosity. They're looking around in unexpected places. And where I saw this was, well, soon after I fell in love with business, I fell in love with retailing. In the 8th grade, my term paper was the life story of Marshall Field, the great Chicago merchant. And it seemed like he had a really interesting life. He built one of the most beautiful buildings on earth with a beautiful Tiffany stained glass mosaic ceiling. He brought interesting products to people who otherwise would have never heard of him and seen him. A good place to work. He did okay for himself. I said, that's cool. I want to do that. And I still, to this day, am in love with retailing. And then I got out. I went through college and working for other companies, and I'm trying to think, what kind of retail store do I want to operate? And when I look forward as a startup entrepreneur, I'm trying to look forward about 20 years into the future. Certainly at least 10, because it's going to take that long to ramp up and make it, worth something. And I know, we have Facebook and YouTube and things that happened overnight, but there aren't many of those. Most things, if you're going to build it up, and whether you're going to sell it or keep it, no matter what you do with it, it's going to take a while to ramp up, and it better be worth something when it's 10 years old. So I'm trying to look 10, 20 years out in the future. And at that point, it was in the 1970s, and I'm trying to foresee the 1980s and 90s. And the first thing I saw then was there was a new breakthrough technology in retailing. Now, when I say technology, I mean any better way of doing things. And my old econ teacher, Milton Friedman, used to talk about maybe the most important technology of the late 20th century was the way that chickens are raised, because that globally changed protein intake and had a huge impact on global society. So it's not just hardware and software and computers, that's an important part of it too. So the new technology in retailing that I saw in the 1970s was an invention called the superstore. It was invented in the late 1950s in Washington, D.C. by a man named Charles Lazarus, and what he had created was a thing called Toys R Us. And his idea was that you take one category of merchandise, a specialty category. So he wasn't a general merchandise store like a Sears or a Walmart or a Macy's or Foley's or whatever. He picked one category, he picked toys, and in that category he carried a very big selection of products and he had very aggressive pricing. And we look at it today in a world of Best Buy and Bed Bath & Beyond and Home Depot and all those folks and say, oh, that's a no-brainer. The idea of big selection, low price, yeah, that works. Well, if you'd sat in econ class back in 1973 and said, hey, I'm going to have a store, big selection, low prices, they would have said, that's crazy, that won't work. Because if you're going to carry a big selection of goods, then you'll have to charge higher prices to finance that inventory. Or if you're going to discount stuff, then you carry fewer goods and have a much smaller selection of goods. And that's actually the thesis that underlies Costco and Sam's, which carry very, very few items relative to the revenue they generate. So the idea was crazy. But Lazarus at that point, even by the 70s, had created Toys R Us. It was really the only successful superstore chain going, and had proven, oh, if you give them good prices and big selection, they'll mob your store and you'll get big market share and it'll work, And he did several times the revenue per location of a typical toy store. And I saw that technology and said, this is so powerful. This is going to sweep through all forms of retailing. It's not just going to stay bottled up in the toy business. And if I can bring that idea to some other category of retailing, maybe I'll have something. So my next thing was, well, what should I sell? What kind of merchandise? And I believe that all business, all economics ultimately goes back to demographics, to your basic long-term trends. And at that point, the baby boom, I'm one of them, depending on how you measure it, over 100 million of us. We were in our 20s, this is back in the 1970s, and if we did anything at all like previous generations, we would go to college or not go to college, get out, live in an apartment, fall in love with somebody, and move to the suburbs and have kids and have a car and a front yard and all that jazz. And so what would be the hot categories? And to me, the real action was going to be in home improvement, auto parts, books, records, toys, and sporting goods. Those are all things that look like, okay, this aging population, that's what the baby boomers are going to want. And so I said, well, I can't do toys. Somebody's already doing that. Now, I don't believe in this thing of the first mover advantage. I think that's a bunch of nonsense. Most great companies were not the first to do it. Microsoft was not a great innovator. Walmart was not a great innovator. Amazon was, I think, the 30th company to sell books online. They were just the first ones to do it right. So it's what matters is who does it best, not who does it first. If you can do it best and do it first, do it, but that so rarely happens. Perhaps the greatest example of that is Federal Express, where somebody dreamed up the idea, did it best, and still, in fact, you may have seen in today's news as DHL is packing up their game and going home, giving up on the United States. UPS, on the other hand, is a pretty effective competitor. Anyhow, so I said, I don't want to do toys. He's, not because he's first, but because somebody is already doing it and they're doing it really well. I didn't know how to build a house or fix a car. I knew how. I've been hanging out in bookstores since I was a little kid. I love books. I said, look, I'll do a book superstore. Now, as I went through that whole process, I've spent about 7 years doing that analysis, hanging out in bookstores and everything. As I went through it, it became obvious to me that whether I did it or somebody else did it, these giant bookstores were going to be all over the United States and probably all over the world. And I was, like Adam Smith's invisible hand at work. It's just going to happen. And then I finally got the point. I start reading the trade magazines and everything. Finally got the point to go to the industry trade show just to get the pulse of the industry. And I showed up, now we're up to 1981 in Atlanta to the Booksellers Convention, and I have a list of workshops. It says the future of bookselling in America. And I said, oh, well, that's where they're all going to be talking about the coming of the book superstore, right? That's what they got to be talking about. And I sit in the back row with my trusty tablet, I still carry with me, and they're up there and they're going on and on about, oh, we got to worry about the Book of the Month Club. And I said, yeah, I know about them. They've been around like 50 years. And we got to worry about Sam's and Costco, and well, not really. That's strategically the opposite of a superstore. We don't really have to worry about them that much. They're going on and on. I realize it's a 1-hour seminar. We're 55 minutes into it. Not a single mention of the coming of the book superstore. And I'm thinking, what planet are these people on, you know? They're standing on the track looking for the future, saying, what's happening next? And the train's coming from the other direction. And I don't know if it hurts more or less to get slammed in the back of the head. But, and I'm like, what's going on? Are these people never been to a Toys R Us? If they haven't, even if they have, they've never taken a single second to think about what are the implications of that industry for our industry. And I thought, well, are they stupid? No, they weren't stupid. Booksellers read a lot. They have high IQs. All I could figure out is they're kind of parochial. They live in their own little world. 51 weeks of the year, all they do is work in their bookshop. The only people they talk to are the sales representatives from Random House and Simon & Schuster. The only magazines they read are Publishers Weekly. And the 1 week of the year they get out of the bookstore, what do? They go to the American Booksellers Convention and hang out with 31,000 other booksellers, They've never been to a toy store show or anything. And all I knew for sure, though, was that I was blessed to have picked an industry to revolutionize that everybody in it was fast asleep. Well, since then, I've dabbled in the travel industry, dabbled in the museum industry, gone into the business information services industry of Hoover's, and I have a list of about 100 more business ideas, which include a number of industries. And my conclusion is it wasn't the booksellers, it's everybody. People tend to get into ruts. And yet the basic rule of discovery is nothing has been discovered by looking in the same place as everybody else. If you are going to look in the same place as everybody else, at least stand on your head or put on your rose-colored glasses. Somehow look at it through a different lens. And what it really comes down to is a driven curiosity. An unwavering curiosity. I don't care if you go study Michael Dell and Bill Gates or go all the way back to Thomas Edison or whatever. What you'll see over and over is this intense curiosity. It drives the people around them nuts. They're always asking questions. They're like, why do you want to know that? What's that got to do with this month's results or, getting the revenue up or whatever our immediate goals are? And that curiosity, and my rule now, I've been blessed to be able to travel the world and meet a lot of people, and my rule is there's not a person on earth I can't learn something from. And my job is to figure out what it is. I can assure you, I get on a plane going to Europe, crossing that big old ocean, hey, that poor person next to me thinks they're going to read a novel. They got another thing coming, because we're going to have a conversation, And retelling, we use a technical term, we will suck your brains dry,